And we have with us today the lovely Rituparna Chatterjee, and the book which is on the shelf there is The Water Phoenix. I believe she told me the cover design is a painting of hers which has been taken, enhanced and used as a book title. Right. So when I was approached by Bloomsbury India when they asked me whether I would have time to read and be in conversation with Rituparna, and said they mentioned that the book was about how she overcame childhood abuse to arrive at where she is, and I said yes instantly. And it's a very important, difficult and relevant topic these days, always was, will be. But I was wondering, I expected it to be suitably dark, intense, difficult, unsettling. And to my very pleasant surprise, when I finished reading the book, I was left with a feeling of joy and lightness. And I was amazed because she doesn't mince around the topic of abuse. It is very much there. It is unsettling when you read those sections. But the overall feeling that you come away with is of somebody who's gone beyond that and has accepted and absorbed joy in her life. And she uses a very interesting technique here. We've all read Marquez, those of us who read know about magic realism, right? Where you put in a magical element into a narrative. And it works well in fiction, because fiction is, after all, magic. Fiction is what we make up in our heads and what we sell to our public, what we can make credible. But she's used this in a memoir. Now, a memoir is the ultimate fact fiction, right? It's fact, little bit your perspectives, a little bit fictionalized at the edges, but how do you put magical realism into a memoir? And it intrigued me especially because my writing, if you have read it or are familiar with it, is very what we call realist fiction. I write very much which is real. I mean, an apple is an apple and the sun is the sun, and there's no magic there. And this really intrigued me. So the first question I would like to put to her is, why did you do this? Why did you seek to inject this magical element into your work? Is it also part of your daily life, and how did it work in this memoir? Rituparna?
Thank you, Jahnavi. So, when we're children, we're born feeling into this world. The whole idea of what is dream, what is reality is something we are taught. You will also see dogs and babies. You'd also see dogs and babies and cats, all of them just staring into space. To them, whatever is that fictional, imaginary, is just as real as a table. And babies are taught, both parents, this is a mic, this is a cup. So because it's about a child, I was very fascinated by this blending of how children, what is imaginary, what is real, what is pretend, all of that. So, and also when you look at life in India, it is so surreal. A crocodile will die somewhere and become a local god. How is that not magical realism? And as journalists, what has happened with the Maharashtra government? How is that not magical realism? It's totally insane. So I think life in India by default is magical realism. And these are terms that the West kind of coined for us, but if you look at all of the older civilizations, they always had myth, legend, folk, dreams, everything mixed up together. In Vietnam, there's one of my favorite poets, Ocean Vuong. It's in his first novel on Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous, that the grandmother, she said, oh my god, you have a pain, so let's rub a boiled egg on it. So now all of his pain is in the boiled egg. How is it realism? Is it magical realism? He had no pain left after that, and then you kind of eat the egg. But so life is like that. I know that, but life is very much like that, especially in the older societies. And to me, it was I wanted to give voice to the child, to do justice, because it took so much courage to write this. And the child is hyper imaginative, so what is the water phoenix? You're going to have to read to find out the realism aspect of it. It doesn't exist. I have not used Sita, an archetypical, mythological character. This is a myth and archetype that I made up, or the kid made up. You have to, kind of read to distinguish those. So, to me, that is very fascinating. I think we're very obsessed with logic as we grow, but if you really look at the newspapers, there's nothing logical about the world at all. It's total chaos and madness. And so when we put in the lens of a child, it just by default was magical realism. It seemed very logical. Yeah.
I think you're so right there. I think in all our Indian lives, the stories we grew up with, our grandmother stories, right? And we just take it, we believe it completely. I mean, Krishna came, then he flew somewhere, then he flew back, and then he did this, and like
Ganesha drinking milk.
Ganesha drinking milk, or Hanuman flying and fetching a jari booty from somewhere when you needed it.
Yeah.
So I think I was watching this. You would have seen, I mean, the Marvel movies, right? And when you talk about metaverse, the other universe, this universe, and I sat through it. My son, who's 21, said that, I mean, you're okay, you don't have any questions. I said, no, I'm used to this. We know the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, so what is like metaverse? I mean, we've been through these worlds, right, the portals and everything. So I think for the Indian context, it does make a lot of sense to us.
Also Hindi serials.
Yes, so it makes a lot of sense to us. And what you said was very significant actually for a child trying to deal with a very difficult topic. And this is a natural fallback, right? You tend to make a little bit of magic around it, and so you can deal with it. So that's how I think this child dealt with her trauma, right, in a way.
Just completely being in an imaginary world for too long than necessary.
Absolutely.
All the way pretty much till 30s.
Absolutely. In fact, we talk about it later, but when he had that tipping point was again another instance of, sort of magical realism, giving you a jolt kind of thing. Right? So, so this was about the magical aspect of her work, and it deals with a difficult topic. It deals with a very sad topic of a child being abused, and that too by people she's familiar with and she knows, and people she ought to have been able to trust and who ought to have protected her. And as I read through the book, I had one question, and I think this is a question we have for all victims of abuse. Especially chronic abuse. I mean, it's a one-time abuse. You get attacked on the street in Church Street. I mean, obviously there's a fight or flight reaction. It's a one-time, but it happens for a long time. And what I wanted to ask Rituparna was, why didn't you reach out? Because apart from the few predators you met in your life, in various stages of her life, there was also a loving family. There was an ancestral house in Calcutta, and there were loving aunts and loving uncles and grandmothers, and all of us are so used to this extended family support in India, right? I mean, a lot of times we speak to our Mashi when we couldn't talk to our mothers about certain things. What stopped you? What was your anxiety about reaching out to another loving adult about what was happening?
Right. When I say, when you say you, I kind of feel I'm representing a whole collective.
Absolutely.
We need to share some stats.
Absolutely, yes.
In 2019, 1 billion kids were abused, and that was way more than the number of COVID patients in 2020. So who died, by the way. So it's pretty insane about what is the real pandemic, how long it's been. It's not just something that happens to girls. I've lost count of the amount of people who come. And whoever read this book said it's me, it's cookie cutter. It really could have come out of a factory. It's like we all did, it's so similar. Because I just want to give it a little context. Any kid who has been abused has always been abused by someone who was meant to keep them safe. Teachers, household help, relatives. How else will you have access to a child? So a lot of things have happened, and the kid does not know what is love, what is abuse. They do not know, everything is new. You do not know this is not normal. And so much of this book is about processing that and figuring it out. And this is with all of them. You figure out that something is wrong by the time you're 10 or 11. By the time you're a teenager, you really want to literally kill it in the whole world. Now, it's a very slow and a long process because it's extreme confusion and doubt. So throughout, when the same people who are supposed to protect you are doing things to you, you cannot distinguish who is safe. There's actually lines, and Room 3 has put that as part of it. So this is kind of the journey, and therefore not validated a kid's, small things. So kids saying something like, oh, it's raining when it's sunny outside because in their imaginary world it's raining. It's just as real as children, but was very kind to me constantly. I mean, I felt like I was even much kinder to me than my own, people. And this is extremely common. So you don't know. You keep thinking something is wrong with you. The other part is you are also trying to protect these abused children. Become so mature, so self-reliant.
A victim, someone's been preyed on is difficult to really encapsulate so clearly, right?
That's why I took your book rather than
Absolutely. So what you're talking about people coming to you, and you being sort of representing a huge number. Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because one thing that really unsettled me reading the book as we went along, towards the end, towards the latter section, she mentions sitting and listening to women talk, and almost every woman she knew in the neighborhood, an auntie or a neighbor or a friend, had similar stories. So and so did that to me, so and so touched me, so and so had that uncomfortable look, so and so pushed me, So it's so pervasive, and it shocked me to think that in such a small community, such huge numbers. And then Rituparna, of course, after this book has been privileged to be in touch with people. People reach out to her, and she's saying so many stories. So is it really? What is the depth and the breadth of this? Oh, is it girls? Is it boys? Is it young men, women? What's your understanding?
The biggest myth is that it happens only to girls. In fact, I think it's much worse for boys, because as girls grow, or even the LGBTQA community, there is a sense of community. We tend to talk, but men tend to shut down. That's all they have known and seen. And I've been told by, the book went to be reviewed by 2 male journalists. Said, I've read it, this is my story, and thank you so much, and all of that. But I cannot review it. I'm shaking. I cannot. So there is all of that, and they had never opened up before. And these are perfect strangers. These are working, by the way. So how do you react? I mean, I'm glad that it helped them face things and feel validated, feel seen. But it is much harder for the men. And another one said, please talk about the men. So I go out of my way to always kind of mention this. It does happen to a lot of men. When you are a kid, I don't think it's so gender specific. You are equally, the gender roles have not been so clearly internalized, because they are imposed by society. So there is that. And I don't know, I don't think if there is anything you can draw any patterns or any parallels about what, is it men, is it women, is it upper class, is it, is it more in the poorer people, is it people of kids who are left with household help because the parents have to work. But though I personally know one man who was abused by the household help, who was abused by teachers, it just went on and on and on. And so it's just, so there are a lot of people, about 50 people came and told me their stories. I had done a lot of processes and healed, which is why it was very easy for me to write this. And why I could focus on it being light and fun and innocent, and the abuse is not your whole life, But even afterwards, people are constantly reaching out, and at this point, I don't know how to hold space for them anymore. I think they're just so happy that somebody's there. And in fact, Nikkei Asia Review, which is, I don't know how many people are familiar with Japanese media, they had done an author profile, and the journalist herself added her own story to it. And she said, this is the first time I can talk about it, and it was her father. And this is a revolution. Living your truth, this is how we all heal as a collective. It's just endless, the DMs, after book events, people coming and talking, it's really sad, but at the same time they feel seen, and
it's a good thing. I mean, there's some sort of communication. There's a lot of opening up because you've written this, right?
Especially for the men, to me, that's
absolutely.
Like,
the men need to speak out more.
Yeah,
right?
I feel it's much harder, especially in these times, to be a man. There's nothing you can do that's right.
Yes,
yeah.
It's very hard for them, true. So what would you say? You said a very interesting thing in the book. There's one very interesting point she made is that gradually she said, you examined, right? Why is it happening to me so often?
Yeah.
And she figured out that somewhere she's being seen as a prey. So what can men, women, children, boys do not to be seen as prey? What would you say? What would you tell parents to tell a child as to how not to be seen as a prey, how not to be taken advantage of?
So one of the things is we love instant coffee, we love instant answers, we want everything as fast as. We hate it when even Ubers are late, Bangalore traffic, we hate being late. Sorry, this takes years, it's a way of living. There is no shortcut, there are no instant answers. And also I always say this book is about emotional abuse, and one of the things this book says right over here is that in the jacket, it doesn't talk about children who have been abused. It says children who felt abused. There's a huge difference. By saying have been, it means there is some proof or validation out there. If you felt abuse, means you are. You don't need to prove, which is, and it's about emotional abuse.
Absolutely, and that's such a blurred line, isn't it? I mean, just a woman just a girl who's never been able to talk to her mother, when she grows up, becomes this woman who feels just non-nurtured, and it's a very delicate form of abuse,
It is.
So it's very blurred lines.
It is,
so,
and even in society, when you look at any rape victims who have had rehabilitation, the way they have to prove to society, I mean, my God, why in the world would anyone report it? It's so traumatic, it's so abusive, and I don't know, I think eventually this will be seen as a crime in itself, and you never know. But the book focuses constantly on emotional abuse. Therefore, when your kid comes and talks about the most boring things, about whatever it is, Legos or their superhero, they've told it to you 1 million times just in the last hour. You have to listen. That this is a test of your patience, because tomorrow the kid will suddenly, in that 1 million time, one tiny word someone picked on, it may not be sexual abuse. It never is. It's always emotional abuse. You will see that the same kid is bullied. The same kid is picked upon. The same kid is always a backbencher. So the sexual abuse is just one symptom. I always say that, as a society we love to compete for tragedy. Oh my God, they have cancer, so we must feel more sorry for them than someone with a panic attack. Excuse me? Who decides that? That in itself is grade 1 gaslighting and emotional abuse. So I think we need to look at ourselves as a society. So there is no easy answer. It's not as simple as good touch, bad touch. How does a kid know? When my kid comes to America, he comes from here, he's very used to there where they are treated as grown-ups since I don't know when, they have such strong respect for boundaries. And here is the opposite. Any Tom, Dick and Harry will pull their cheeks, will give them a lollipop. Most of it is affectionate and harmless, but how do you know when it's not? Uncle ke godi mein baith jao. There's one such exact scene. Auntie ke godi mein baith jao. How do you know who? And this is another thing. There are enough women who have abused men also.
Yes. That again needs to be highlighted.
Yes, this needs to be. And there are mothers who have abused the sons of others. So you have to understand that it's psychological. If this book would have been a novel, I really wanted to get into the psychology of the abuser and have some compassion, because the moment we have made someone wrong, that it doesn't solve anything. But they needed it to be a memoir. That was a fight we got into, me and the whole world, pretty much the publisher, the agent, because...
Did you want it to be a novel?
And that's why it reads like a novel.
Okay, it reads like a novel. So unless someone tells you it's a memoir, if you didn't put it there, it could just be a novel.
Everyone keeps telling me it's a novel, and I don't correct them anymore, because I'm a little tired of that. But also, I think the reason they said they wanted it to be a memoir is because there is no story like this, that there is a real life story of somebody who healed and has a really fulfilling life, and so they felt that would really help, and they were correct. Look at the emails coming in, look at the feedback coming in. So
the minute you read it, you don't need like that many emails. The minute I read it, I felt joyous and light. I'm like, this is amazing. This is supposed to be a dramatic book, but it's not.
Yeah. I wish more people would see it that way, because many people are like, oh my God, it's about abuse, and I'm like, it's okay, you don't have to read it. Don't come telling me this, because you're like the millionth person. But it is actually, I always say, it's a celebration of childhood. It's everybody's story, because we all as kids felt abandoned. Anybody here has a sibling?
All of us.
Yeah, so all of you, if you had a younger sibling, the parents loved that sibling more. Maybe you got punished, so then they felt that. So at that point you were completely betrayed. In a year you understood it was just, those things. But at that moment you felt betrayed. So this book is about all the little betrayals when they didn't pick you to play together in a group game, or the teacher decided you are not the favorite suddenly, or you are, or whatever it is. There are endless. Childhood is constant betrayal. So it deals with all of that, and all the little joys and the animals, and all of it.
But what's amazing is now you do with the second one, I think. But generally you built up very strong interpersonal relationships, and you would think that someone who's victim of abuse would not have that, would have something wrong with them, so they couldn't forge strong relationships. So how did you go? How were you so even-keeled, so level-headed with all these girls? How did you manage school life, boarding school, which in itself a lot of kids find hard to cope with,
I would say boarding school saved me. That chapter is called Salvation.
Yes.
Because it was a Christian boarding school, and I was trying to understand what are these words they keep talking about, heaven and brides of Christ, and there's all these kids trying to understand it. It totally saved me, because I was so isolated. I did not have a mother figure, and I was just used to trusting strangers in a stranger because I had no other choice. So it was very easy in boarding school, and I started feeling so safe in a community of women. I went to a women's college, Sophia.
I think that makes sense, because you mentioned that suddenly it's just girls in the dorm, so it makes sense, yes.
Right, and you just, and I could be myself and breathe, and I didn't realize how there's other kinds of abuses that go on, but the biggest one wasn't there, and I think it taught me to still have faith and trust in life, And that is what I think constantly distinguishes me from all the other abuse victims. I know they don't trust anybody. They are still the same abuse kids, so they have very difficult relationships. Their spouses don't know who they are. I'm like, wait a minute, how come I know all of this stuff and your spouse doesn't know? It's a bit
strange.
It's very sad because especially the men, I have to keep harping. I feel someone needs to talk about them.
Right.
And you know that even when I always feel like everyone's my family, not necessarily what I chose by birth. In fact, Ashutosh here is like a brother to me, very much so. And you know, so I think it was easy in many ways to trust anyone except for family. It was very strange. I could trust the world. I could not trust anyone in authority.
Which is kind of understandable,
Yeah.
because once you went, and it's so far removed from your domain, right? The boarding school in the hills. Maybe that's also a physical relocation away from.
And it was very beautiful. There was,
Exactly.
and
That
wherever
makes-
I grew up, I had a lot of nature, and I think that has its own
Calming
soothing.
effect,
Even
yeah.
the houses I grew up in were all in small town India, so I was always outside in nature, and I was reading, and I was always in my imaginary world. And I feel so sorry for all the children of today because they all have their gadgets from
I know.
whatever age, pretty much before they can walk. And I'm so grateful I had the luxury of being completely bored, no one to play with, and I think that made me able to really be present with myself.
Absolutely.
Completely, no.
Self-reliant, yes.
No, not even without books. So I think that I just, all the things they say now, you are your own best friend and self-love, all these buzzwords, it just became a way of being because it was a deeply, for lack of a better word, spiritual way of living. Very Taoist, very connected, deeply connected to nature and to the self.
Correct.
So I think that just was.
So this is a great insight. It's for victims in any sphere to how do they move on and how do they cope during those years, which is from your, if one reads this, there's actually a path to
Yes,
how to
yes.
get there, right? So
Yes, that's why the memoir part, because
exactly,
there's real
exactly.
solutions.
And there were certain solid pillars throughout your life, and I think I appreciated that also because that's one of the pillars in my life, and I write a lot about that in my writing too. Comfort things like comfort food.
Yes.
There's so much food here. I was like feeling hungry. I was salivating as she's mentioning stuff because a lot of the stuff I like also, jhalmuri, this, that, and the stuff we grow up with in childhood. So I write a lot about that in my writing, and she writes a lot. And that, I think those little things become like little living characters, right, in our lives. And for Rituparna, definitely. One was food, one was some senses of smell,
Yes.
And immediately there's an emotional, of course we know psychologically, there's certain foods trigger a response, the gastroenteritis, the stomach starts churning, certain smells trigger happiness or joy or sorrow. So for her it was like a physical element, it was like it tagged her everywhere she went. So you want to tell them how that...
Right. So I always say this, that in the Water Phoenix, because of the transient nature of life, apart from the girl and a few animals, the only consistent characters are feelings. I always say the protagonists in this book are not human, they're all feelings. And this is because when you are very little, we are born feeling into this world. We are not born thinking. We do not know, again, the magical realism aspect. We do not know how to think until we go to school and we are taught 2 plus 2, so we have to think, we have to remember our tables. So early childhood, I think, is the most interesting part. If you're as fascinated with psychology, I'm extremely fascinated, that you can tell, and a lot of Jungian psychology influences here. So when the child is born feeling, that is how you start associating with the senses and feeling. So okay, this must be the smell of relief. This is the taste of comfort. And then there's a part where what is comforting to the 2 cousins who bullied me so badly. Their mother's food, comfort food, was the idea of terror for me. So when we say maa ke haath ka khana, it is your maa ke haath ka khana. It could be my idea of terror. My maa ke haath ka khana might be your idea of terror. I mean, you can totally talk to prisoners of war. I'm sorry, America has this influence. So many prisoners of war stories. Every family has some Vietnam veteran. So if we go for a certain meal, that may remind them of a trigger, and that's their idea of, oh my God, they'll actually have a PTSD physical reaction. So what is comfort food? What is deliciousness? All of these are, they're all feelings.
Yes.
So that's what the smell of relief, the taste of joy. So everything is just associated, taste of terror. And in fact, I'm Bengali, but I could not handle the smell of mustard oil, until 5 years ago. That's like so I could not eat mustard-based fish curries until this.
Which is 3/4 of the food.
Which is pretty much all
of the food. Yeah.
Which is all of the food, and it's so sad because even after so much healing, it took me that much time to be able to own it, and I hope my trip to Calcutta will actually be, I'll be able to kind of do justice to that too. Yeah.
It's interesting. And
turn it all into from terror to comfort food.
Yeah. So what would you say was what finally transformed you? So at the end, just to give you context, Rituparna says what finally empowered her is when she realized that the power lay in her hands, and the power was to forgive. The power was to forgive this man and that hand and that touch and that look, and really get on with it, which is what adds to this. And it's amazing to look at the language, because as a writer, when I read a book, I'll also look at the language. I just won't look at content, right? So, and as I was going along, and I wrote an email to her saying, every now and then the words repeated were sweet, lovely, kind. She was the sweetest lady. This was a lovely book. This was the kindest touch, So for someone to suffer abuse, I mean, the first reaction, I'm actually a trained doctor, and I've worked in psychiatry a couple of years, and the first reaction to somebody who suffered an adverse reaction is to turn negative, right? It's human nature. Like, she did this to me, I'm going to go slap the next child. It's to be bitter, maybe. It's to have long-standing bitterness. But here it is the sweetest, loveliest kindness, and I was like so happy, So what was that tipping point? What finally made you decide I'm going to take everything, all these feelings into my own hands?
Right. So I always say, nobody here is Jesus Christ. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We are not. We're very much humans with our pettiness and our hurts and our resentments, all of which we nurture just as much.
But this was an unusual sort of
right.
anger or sorrow. This is not really in the realm of even normal pettiness. So resentment. So how did you have that?
But it is unnatural. It's very common. It's just how much you delve into it. So there is that we're coming to it 2.0, I guess. Yes. That's episode is
absolutely.
2.0. Nobody in their right. No, we are all too lazy. How many of us will even go work out or no, we are not supposed to eat this. That until and unless things get really bad. So literally my life was on the line. I pretty much lost my mind.
So after you had your son, right?
After I had my child, it was the most difficult time. I couldn't report the way I was used to. I wasn't fighting it. I was quite present as it is. But I had severe postpartum depression. I think every mother has it. It's just who gets a diagnosis or not. Some are too severe, especially in a highly isolated Western society. Now it's here also, and you've written about that in research, right? So it's extremely isolated, just the same. We're just catching up with all of America's shenanigans. Unfortunately, yeah. So my postpartum depression was so severe that I lost my mind pretty much, and it's a miracle I did not land up in the American psychiatric system, because I know a lot of people who are on medication since age 4 till they're 40, then they're still on medication, which means it doesn't work. You have to do some. Yeah. So it's not. I mean, there are excellent therapists, and they do, but an addiction to medication does not work anymore. So
only medication doesn't work. There have to be supplemental.
Yes, and I'm seeing that in India. I know people who are popping 3 pills a day, which is like, how come you're always on an SOS? You cannot run like a maniac. Modern society is set up for. Modern society's panic attack always. I was just telling you that the streets of Delhi, I think, seem more chaotic than a lunatic asylum. Might be a lot more peaceful out there. Because I've always been fascinated with the mind, and some of it is anyway psychology, and I came this close to landing up in an asylum because the state was so bad. I was seeing things, I was hearing things that were not. This is beyond imagination. I knew this.
Beyond magic realism.
This was total horror after horror. And in Bombay, the event was done with a horror writer, Neil DeSilva. And I was telling him I was not interested in ghost life is horrific enough. I think that's just a different level. Some of us feel very deeply, and some of us don't. Then we need a roller coaster ride to make us feel alive, or horror movies. You suddenly feel that jolt and you feel alive. So it was so bad that I really had no other choice but to completely shut down. And I looked okay to everybody around, that I was always quiet and gentle, and as we tend to be reclusive as writers. We tend to be just reading, or people around us are kind of used to that. So no one around me really knew, and I was so lucky that I ran into a yoga and a meditation teacher who diagnosed everything correctly. I constantly say that I'm the luckiest girl, because there are so many times I should have been dead at this age, I should have been dead at that age. I mean, the suicide attempt started at age 6. There's nothing that's been sugar-coated, and it's true with all abuse victims. You know, either that or they want to kill. Like, either you're that fight or flight. Either you turn into a predator, and almost all abusers were abused. This is what not many people know. So
that's coming out more and more.
Yeah, that's why just making someone a villain.
I saw this very interesting sort of a memoir documentary / on Netflix about Jewish town, the Hasidic community, and every little boy who's been abused, the person who's abused him has serially been abused. It goes up generationally. So great grandfather, that generation abused the next, and abused the next. And somehow I stop and think that if you've been abused, wouldn't you be more empathetic? I mean, would you?
That's, I think, me and the rare.
Yes. So, but how does? But that's very common. I mean, you don't know how it works, but an abusee does turn into an abuser.
Because society is focused on survival, and it is easier to be a predator or an abuser or a bully.
Yes, than to be seen as prey, as prey.
So that's why society focuses on that. However, I do think it's possible to just trust and live in faith and not go that route and still have a very, I mean, I'm living proof. It's possible.
Absolutely. So then it too
was the episode where I started having symptoms of what would be labeled as schizophrenia, seeing things that are not there, hearing things that are not there, which it's beyond magical realism. It's beyond writers imagining, the genie coming out of smoke or whatever it is, beyond all these things. And it was happening very, very, very fast. There were too many things happening. I'm shocked how I could even distill it. What I've written, the speed is very fast, and it's like almost breathless. Even that is like 1/100th or 1/1,000,000th probably of what really was happening. There's only so much you can capture even in a movie or in a book. And then I pretty much lost my mind, and I think she calmed me down. That's when the whole spiritual process began. And I think being in California really helped me, because I was a hardcore atheist until then. And then she told me that what the Western medicine sees as schizophrenia and will lock you up in an asylum is actually seen by shamans in all Eastern cultures, so African culture, Middle Eastern culture, certain Afghani culture, all the older cultures, Chinese, Mongolian, name it. As somebody who's able to see into other realms, we get a bit, all over those. So then I was taught about all the other stuff that we are not taught in Western medicine or Western science. There are different layers of energy bodies and all of that. And then she gave me certain meditations to just come and to center all of the energies. And we see all of that with breath work and everything. But it was not so simple. It was really crazy. And this is how just being you and being available and open, you can save someone's life. She saved my life. A total stranger. Yet another stranger who saved my life. This is a constant that if you have faith, life will take you.
Someone will turn up. Some stranger will turn up.
You need to have faith, and you need to forgive your family for not being there. This is what abuse victims hold so much against their families, and everything is abuse. Some kid being beaten up by just because it was okay, or we can laugh about it. Doesn't mean it's okay.
Abuse. And in today's world,
you get arrested for that in America. Yes.
No, even here we saw conscious. I mean, I don't ever remember raising a hand to my child. It's here. It's very equal. It's you explain to them, and they have to understand it. They have to absorb it. And if he chooses not to do it, then he'll tell me, I don't choose to do this. So I think the levels of respect and boundaries, what you talked about.
The correct word that you use, choose, because you're respecting them. You're respecting that. Okay, this is what it is. Now you face your consequences.
Absolutely.
Let them live life and learn that.
Totally. So it's coming in here too. I think this new generation, thankfully, have been, now my son is 21, so he's now joined the other generation, but I've seen the parents now are so informed.
Right.
And we're going to take that good bit of the West, I think, is coming here.
Yes. The West is definitely an extremely, a lot more empathetic
to children. They treat them as individuals.
Even I feel that California healed me. All we talk about are our feelings. How's your dog feeling? How's your plant feeling? Dog, even that level. And here it's the opposite. We're so all over the place, and a lot of friendships are actually emotional abuse. I'm sorry if I'm with you and you're on your phone. You're not present with me. I'm going to consider that as emotional abuse. Why bother meeting in the first place?
Absolutely.
Just because something is normal. I mean, in the about I think 2 centuries ago, children of French royalty were left in diapers at between once a month. This would be
absolutely
terrible abuse.
They'd be taken out and put into the foster system, I think, now.
Yes, absolutely. You'd be arrested in most of the developed world for that. And can you imagine what would happen to that kid? Just because it's normal, sati was normal, you know. Just because something is normal doesn't mean it's not abuse. It's just a matter of time before society wakes up.
Absolutely.
And sees that it's not cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then the word was forgiveness for you, post.
So forgiveness, I will have to say that all that Catholic boarding school did have some impact because they were always about forgiveness. Here, there are some, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but there are some surreal events that happened and that made me feel so sorry for the abuser. And I realized how lucky I was because I actually till today, you know, feel very, very supported by life. So when people say they're alone and they're lonely, I was like, I don't know, I think you're just not open enough. You're just holding on to hurts, and that's why I feel this is the book for everybody. Let all hurts go.
In many spheres, actually. It's just not. It could be a friendship meltdown. It could be a marital breakdown. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the PTSD is the same, and now we're waking up. All of India has PTSD from COVID. I genuinely think they're brain fog. I'm coming after so many years, and it's
do you see a change?
Huge.
Like what?
I mean, it's just the way people are not present anymore. They don't meet, and I don't know Bangalore yet, but this is mostly Delhi or Bombay. I think they become a lot more like the West without any of the good parts of the West. Like all the bad parts of the West are there. Transactional relationships, more networking than friendships. You know, earlier things used to be more unconditional. What can I get from you if I spend this hour with you? But otherwise you're going to just watch Netflix or go partying. So what exactly have you done with your life? I am judging here. Sorry, I'm being very.
No, but it's good to see with that other vision because you've come in from outside, right?
Especially California. Yes, that society is extremely isolated, very, very isolated. But it is completely centered around love. So when I landed in Bangalore, a friend of mine, he picked me up. He left. He took half a day off work and he drove all the way to the airport, which is like 1.5 hours to pick me up. And I was here, like, this is what we do in America. We do it for everybody. At least we do it in California, which I always say is not real America. But you know, our lives are around love because all of them are dysfunctional families, so they grow up valuing love so much. And that's why they have so many divorces. They're so romantic. They're just obsessed with the idea of love.
The
and
ideal
they are
love,
very
yes.
dedicated. So it's very serious. Whereas here, I think that's dying. Whereas we were the softer culture, we were the more open cultures, and it's not as simple as joint families, neighbors. You know, all of that. So I hope we get the good parts about the West also, not just the alienation, not just the isolation.
I think one portion of this has been a good thing for all of us. You mentioned it in your book, and there's a lovely quote which I forgot to get I've written it down about solitude. And I write a lot about this. And for any writer and reader, writers and readers are very alike. So we're usually solitary people, or we are what we call introvert, extrovert, which I fall into that domain. But I'm also very social, but I also need my space too. You know, because you need to distill your thoughts, distill your energies, and you need to. In the pandemic, I've noticed earlier. In Indian culture, being solitary was a no-no. Whereas in the West, the lone philosopher, the lone doctor, the lone writer has always been respected, like he's doing something good, he's busy with something. I don't know if it happened to you, and I'm sure it's happened to all of us. If you're a solitary child or if you're a loner, oh my goodness, my grandmother would predict the most dire future. That boy will not do well. He sits by himself. He does not talk to his species much. He's like anybody, and what's wrong with him? So this emphasis on being community-minded, being so talkative was a big thing. This time I've noticed people have realized that you have to really deal with solitude. Those 3 months we've all at home in lockdown and how you treat solitude is your strength really. And for all of us who've grown up, we like our little space. I used to, in fact, in a big joint family, go under a table and read. That was my little world. You can't disturb me there. So I had that where she's under the table, she's reading. So I embraced solitude early on in patches. You don't have to be a solitary person, but you need your space. That part is coming through now. A lot of people are saying, a lot of very people who wanted all the time to be out partying are telling me that I'm so happy at home. I'm so happy gardening. I'm so happy playing chess with my son, you know.
Yes,
so that's one positive thing. So it's but you're right. People do hesitate to go out unless it's really important. Unless,
and the definition of important can often be emotionally abusive to the other person.
I suppose so.
You will go for a wedding, but you may not come for something that may be very important to that person.
To other person, yes,
you may
correct.
go for something. I've canceled meetings in California, saying I think I need to be alone, or I'm feeling anxious, and that's good enough. And they will absolutely
not judge you. Yeah.
They will say, please think soothing thoughts.
Yeah.
Take a bath. We can just do this. And these are professional work meetings. I'm not even talking about friends. So I feel when we have this level of non-judgment here versus, just honestly, rather than, I can give you an example. A couple of people 20 minutes before saying, I have a stomach ache, I can't come. I mean, you could just say that you can't come. That's fine. I don't think the stomach ache came 20 minutes before. It's very obvious. Or in India, we'll say, oh, I have fever. How come, for anything, how come you just had fever right now? So you could be honest.
You can be honest. I don't feel like coming. And that's possible. You may not feel like coming. Yeah, you may not.
Just be honest. And I pride myself on having such friends here too. Quite a few of them who will at least
tell you what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just respectful. It happens to the best of us,
Absolutely.
And then there are people who I know have got stomach aches who actually need to go to the hospital, but will show up at a wedding no matter what because log kya kahenge.
Yeah, that's true. It's all types.
Yes. But forgiveness, I think, comes when you have sat with yourself so much that nothing daunts you, nothing scares you. With all due respect, if you're sitting at home and watching Netflix, you're not sitting with yourself.
True.
If you are consuming, you are not sitting with yourself. That's not solitary.
True.
That's distraction.
True.
So if you are truly with yourself, then you face all your inner demons, and then you go through a lot of grief. And this is the ones from the most happy childhood. There's always something. I mean, we are all humans. And then, that forgiveness part becomes valid for all of us.
True.
In my case, I always say forgiveness is the most selfish thing you can do because it's got nothing to do with the other person. You have cleared yourself of all of this resentment, this heavy backpack you've been carrying. Like, I don't know, 700-ton backpack.
And you offloaded it and you're...
Yeah, you're free and you're like, how can I give this person the right to dictate the blueprint of my life? No, I am so selfish here that I'm going. It's a completely internal job. So when you forgive, you're just letting go of the story. And then there are real psychiatric processes of how you live life as art, which is the last chapter.
Right. So this is, not in a nutshell, we've sort of talked around the core of the book. It's a lovely book, so I'd urge all of you to pick it up and read it. And Rituparna's here today, we're lucky, so we'd love to have questions from you. And I always scare my audiences early. I said, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to ask questions from all of you. So I'm hoping some hands are raised.
Please.
You mentioned about men suffering abuse, and obviously the first thing that comes to mind is what's going on in social media, which has got a lot of coverage these days. In the last couple of months, that is the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. Sorry, it's very commercial and
very important these stories come out.
Yeah, true. But somehow, I mean, this is my opinion because I really don't know the exact truth. But some people say it's a sham. I mean, I would like to know what your take on it is, since you're from the US and you yourself have written a book and have spent considerable thought on abuse on both sides, on both genders.
In principle, I do not comment because I don't want to judge anybody. It's also very hard being a celebrity in the limelight where you're constantly judged. I have no opinions. I just feel it's important that these stories come into the limelight because it encourages the common person also to go to the law when things happen. But who is correct, what happened, I think that's just gossip for us. I also stay away from, following too much of the media so that I can live in my magical realism and produce books that I'm proud of. Sorry to disappoint.
Under magical realism, right? I think as Indians, a lot of us think in terms like this. If we read Marquez, and there's this very ongoing joke that some kid in Kerala was asked, who's your favorite Malayali author? And he said Marquez. Yeah. And I think as Indians, the way we think is like this, the world's floated away from me, and stuff like this that we think and we talk in terms of in regular conversations. When you were writing this, were you consciously thinking of constructing sentences and narratives that were magically realistic in that sense? Or did it just come from like your memory of being here, thinking that way, speaking that way?
I don't know about you, Jahnavi, but I never know what my next sentence is going to be.
Yes.
It's
You finish one sentence and it's a relief, and the next one we wait for. You know?
right,
But,
right.
but what you said is that we focus on I just focus on every letter, every pause. Forget a letter, forget a word, every pause is focused on. So that's
Right.
how the thought goes into literary writing.
Right, so because we're literary writers, and I think your question, and I really need to make this distinction because there are enough formulaic populist writers for whom it's about plot, character outline, and then you're creating a formula that's not too different from a Salman Khan movie. We all need I always say we are the vegetables and those are the potato chips which we all need, and we wish we could have it forever. So I think it's more of a way of living, a way of being, especially as you grow, because magical realism, the world will come and kill you for it. 2 decades in journalism, a lot of unlearning to be done. I have to read very consciously, and you're a writer, you're constantly being bombarded with your friends' books. I now have to set up my boundaries and say, you know what, I love you so much, but I cannot read this, it's going to mess up with what it is. It took a lot of, I will not read Sapiens. Are you kidding me? That's like 4 years of my writing gone down the drain. If I work very, very hard at staying like a toddler. That is the secret, frankly. This is an endless process. So, whatever cloud gazing, whatever you want to call it, watercolors are a way for me to completely, I've almost been stopped by, I've almost been arrested by a cop because he was convinced I'm on drugs because I was staring into space. So, things like that. I don't even drink or smoke or anything. So, magical realism, it requires a way of living. Any writer, it's always their work, their way they are, who they are is always on the page. So a reader will always know the writer, no matter how fictional it is. Even if it is something like Lord of the Rings, we will know Tolkien better than his peers or than the family of people around them. So I never know what my next sentence will be. I do not know my characters. I do not plot. It has taken me years of unlearning and completely zero confidence. If I would have been the person I would have probably had 9 books out. It took me a lot of serious unlearning, especially all of that journalism and logic. And yes, in India, I don't know, when we were growing up, it was very common for friends to say that if you registered something late, you're a tube light. Look at anybody in the West. A human being is a tube light. That's magical realism right there. So when people tell me that, it's a magical realism memoir, I'm like, life in India is very magical realism. Look at we talk, look at our colloquialisms. So there's all of that. And I would say it's very, very consciously trying to say, not even the children of today, I'm sorry, they're too logical. I work with 64 kids. They're too logical for me. I'm like, you guys are too adult for me. Stop boring me. Go get a life. And why are you guys on these gadgets? So, it's just sit with yourself, be bored, dream a bit. So, I think toddlers are my age group. They're the ones I love to hang out with, or these certain dogs and animals. Wherever there's the less language and words, the better. Because wherever there's language, there's thinking. Wherever there's thinking, there's less magic, more logic, and we've lost that. So long answer, it's just a way of living. It's a constant commitment every second. It becomes easier because that's what you want to do with your life. So it's not difficult actually.
It's so interesting what she said about the fact that you wouldn't read somebody's work if you're in the middle of something.
I've had to learn that.
So this is something all of us writers do. In that when you write, especially when you put word to paper, you start your drafts, right? I will not read anything which is not of the same tone. In writing, there's a tone. So if I'm my kind of writing, I would, while I'm writing, maybe I read a Alice Munro, I read a Coetzee, but I would not read something else which would then interfere with my rhythm.
Yes.
And as she said, in the beginning you say yes to everything, and now if someone says, will you please launch this book, and if it's not to my tone, I probably will say no because I'm writing something else and I'll lose my voice. Or the other danger is you like what you're reading and you start parroting. Suddenly it's not your work, suddenly it's sounding like that other writer's work. So this is interesting what we do, right? We don't, when we read or when we formulate or when we write, we don't read at all. Then it has to be our voice there. So it's interesting.
I just like to add to that. You look at method actors. My last book was of the actor Nawazuddin Siddiqui, and I was his shadow for 6 months, literally short of following him to the bathroom. That's pretty much all that was left. And it was so interesting to see that. And I think actors have it super easy. It's just one role. And they're completely immersed. They are not doing 10 movies at the same time, especially the roles are intense. So we assume they're good actors. I'm not talking about anything and everything that passes off. But as writers, you are all the characters. You are the worlds. You are the whole book. You are the backstories. A writer's job is really very easy, and that's why most writers kill themselves. Well, unless they have some spiritual backing or some type of love or family. Virginia Woolf, T.S. Eliot, the list is very long. This is the reason, until and unless you have a way to handle all of this. Because you really become your entire world. And if you have any writing, if you have writer friends, especially literary ones, and if they are in the middle of a book they have not finished, oh my God, you don't want to go near them. Trust me, we can be very mean, not because we want to, because it is a possession, you are consumed. So anything that interferes will kind of, when you read a book, you want to be transported, you want to be hypnotized. If we are not in that world, how are you going to get hypnotized if we are not? So that's why we have to read in a certain way. In my case, I just take it to an extreme and you have to live in a certain way. I don't know, it makes me very happy and light and...
You have to be...
you become the characters. My wardrobe also changes. Yeah. It's called method writing. There's actually a workshop in San Francisco called method writing, in which they took it from method acting, in which you just become completely that. I mean, you anyway are, but now you've articulated why this is happening. Yeah.
Interesting. No, but this thing about... and there's a problem in India again. So what she's talking about in California is a privilege that you can withdraw, you can wear what you want. The struggle in India...
We're always in lockdown.
But the struggle in India for the last few years, not just now, is that, and especially for women writers, this is something I speak a lot about, in that for women, as in anything, it's always tougher, that particular field. So, especially when you're doing something as nebulous as writing. Writing is not considered serious in India. And there I was a doctor, which is very serious. You get a lot of respect and you're really doing something. So if you're tired or you're not in the mood, it's fine. She's a doctor, she's tired. I mean, she can sit. But as a writer, you are zero. You are nobody. So your writer, the first draft, first chapter coming, the words flowing, a friend calls up and says, come for coffee. And you say, I have to finish this chapter. Chapter hi to hai. And I mean, look at her now, she's throwing attitude, she's not coming for her coffee and all. Then suddenly, I'm that sort of person, okay, I shut my book, I computer and I've got to come for coffee. Then you've lost that chapter altogether. Family, your domestic help, aaj kya banao? And then you're like, I'm writing the next big book. It's like, theek hai na, but then what do we go for lunch, So I have, in fact, told my husband, I now need an office. I at least need a studio where I can get away for the day and really take this seriously, because we do not get that respect. But a man, I'm sorry, this is a gender thing. A writer, please, his chai comes, his lunch is sent, his feet are massaged, and but he's writing a book, So I'm also writing a book, So it's very difficult. So you need to withdraw. In that stage, or the final stage of writing, my friends see me less and less. I'm at home, I do all this stuff because my husband travels a lot, I single parent my child. And all that I'm available for. I have my breaks to look after things, but socially you'll see me less and less. The bookstore will see me less, the book community will see me less, because that 1 year, you really need to keep everything intact, like she said. Because like you said, it's not just a protagonist, I have 9 characters.
And the world.
And the universe.
There's no set designer, there's no costume designer.
And the universe. That I made this mistake in a particular scene, because I write in a back and forth, of now and then back and now and back. Our girl was in a red dress and I put a yellow dress in some later. And a reader told me, the first one of my early works, and I was always conscious after that, even the continuity like a film thing. You leave somebody in 1979 and she's using Lidl soap, and she better be using Lidl soap again 20 chapters later in 1979. So there's so much we have to do. Apart from getting the words out, the mood correct, the tonality. So writing is such an immersive experience, and in India, women writers are not forgiven for not being out there, for not being there at that puja, for not being there at that wedding. For me at least, I fit everything into real life, and I tend to write at night from 10 to 3 in the morning. Rest of life has to go on, whether your sleep suffers or not. It's not easy, right?
I'd like to add to that. This is not just India, this is every woman in every culture all over the world, irrespective of, even if you are extremely wealthy and have an army of staff, there's family always to make your life hell. Yeah. I feel now more and more, I feel family is just we just don't know how to love, because if there are so many expectations and if you cannot understand and hold space. So luckily I have managed to build a world around me where this is less and less. Now is the opposite. Now all the family of Forgiven are constantly, how many words did you write? Did you finish that chapter? You don't come here. I told them you're writing. And I'm like, this is the other extreme. Yeah, this is very new, and it's a testimony to forgiveness, and to, your world does transform as you transform. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I just don't want to talk. And it's just so sweet and supportive and loving. And I wish I had that when I was maybe your age. It would have been very. But I know so many writers in the West. In fact, one of the ones who has blurred this one, Devi Laskar, her book, The Atlas of Reds and Blues, was on gun violence. Again, real based. She's a mother of 3, and again won a bunch of awards for the Washington Post Book of the Year. She could not write until her kids were in high school. And I am like, no, I write from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. From 6 a.m. It's school rush. You really don't want to look at me, then I'm like the worst, meanest person, like all mothers, school rush. And we have to also drive our kids to school. We also have to pack everybody's lunches, all of that. So I have to sacrifice on my sleep. There's no help. There's no delivery, nothing. So then when and then while I'm working with the 64 kids at school, suddenly I will say things into my dictaphone app. Suddenly I will write things down. Kids don't judge you. That's the one thing I love about being with them. That you can just be yourself, because everybody's weird and having their own thing anyway. So you can just be. So after that, again 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is my writing, but the rest, and now I think it has caught up with me. So I'm not able to. But I just wanted to reiterate that every man I know doesn't have this problem, because there are some really good friends of mine who will agree to that. I mean. Shaikot Mojumdar has openly spoken about it. He's a writer. Couple of Aruna was in. I'm just naming people who have openly spoken about it. Male writers, and it's just the way society is set up, and things are tougher on women. And yeah, I mean now I'm like, someone please kidnap me for 3 weeks so I can finish my second draft, because I'm done. It's been really long time.
So that was funny. It's almost a joke. So what you said about Devi Laskar saying when the kids go to high school, when she started writing. So I've always told my child, because my husband was based in different cities, Delhi and Bombay, and I brought this child up alone, and I'm a hands-on mom, no help in the house. So like tennis classes, guitar classes, everything, all of that. So when he slept at 8 o'clock, I'd sit down and think and read. First you have to read. See, if you're a writer, the first you have to read to get into the zone. So I pick something which is to my tone, a Quincy or a Mann or an Anita Desai, and then you read that, and then you get into the zone. Then you start 10 to 3. When you start, I pack up, because I have to be up at 6 for the school bus again. So practically one slept 3 to 4 hours every night, and when you're seriously writing. And then I kept telling my son that when you go to college, I will write a novel a year. Because most of my books took a long time. Rebirth took a year, but Undertow took 10 years. So finally he went to college, and the lockdown hit, pandemic hit. So he stayed at home and did 2 years of college from home. So we laughed. He said, "Ma, I've gone to college, but he still can't write." So now he's left, and now hopefully one will write.
And then there's my son, who's mentioned in all of the acknowledgements and very strange things. Like because he was a kid, drowned my computer, tap danced on my phone, he was a toddler, all of these things. And he cannot understand what's a big deal, because he calls it, they've written something, they've scribbled something, they staple the pages, and they're authors. So what's the big deal? Why are you taking years? And so there's that other thing that like it's endless. And I just want to reiterate that it's the same all over the world, irrespective of class, irrespective of culture. All women are in the same boat.
Especially women writers.
Yeah, and also when you like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. after that, I just don't sleep. So it's the same thing. We all are functioning. Now my body can't take it. So the sacrifices that go in. Yeah. Any other questions, please? Yes, please. Oh, just 1 second. Hold on.
Voice actor and also a writer. Whatever you were telling, like setting the tone and getting into the subject and getting isolated and start writing and getting whatever we need. That we need to do also as a voice actor. Yeah, and you were mentioning that you put a red dress on a girl and then yellow, and your reader mentioned we have to take care of that also. Like, yeah. So what I was about to ask you is like. We all set our framework before or during the writing or during our work. What if you have all the equipment, whatever you need, suddenly you black out, writer's block. What do you do? How do you come out of it?
I have the opposite problem, and I think that goes to my answer on magical realism, because my whole life is dedicated to living a certain way. I have the opposite problem. My record is 10,000 words a day. That's not every day though. Mostly it's about 2 to 4, and something I'm pleased with. But the point is that it takes a way to live. I always say writer's block is life block. What is just a flow of a certain energy or zone, whatever is the label you want to put on it. You have to choose to live in a conscious way, and there will be a million demands on you. It is a way of breathing and living, and then the writer's block goes away. For me, when I do watercolors, things come. In fact, I'm in the middle of like 2-3 novels will come together. Someone told me, why don't you become a video game writer? Because I run a writer's group called Shut Up and Write. So, and they said, why don't you become a video game writer? Because you have the opposite problem. And I'm like, it's too much flow, I cannot keep up. One body can only contain so much. Like, even though I type very fast or whatever ways I have, record and then dictate or write long, I have everything. So you have to find ideally a different way. For me, it's watercolor painting. Also, I cook a lot, I bake a lot. I don't know what I'm going to make, by the way. There's no plan. Because you're so solitary, and housework has become very meditative for me. I've been addicted to all this jhadu, pocha, bartan, all of it, because it becomes very, very, you get a very zen, like meditative quality in your subconscious, which is where the real gold is. So it's the opposite of writer's block. Everything happens. It's like I'm constantly living with my characters 24/7. So it becomes my world, but what I'm trying to say is you need to live in a different way. You cannot live like a normal, whatever is the definition of normal, I don't know. I find society highly unnatural and therefore abnormal, just because we are all against nature, right? Our body clock, our society, everything. You have to find something that gets you in the flow, and maybe it's dance, maybe for yourself. Maybe it's gardening, but it's often an artistic activity or a rigorous physical activity. I'm just saying, a lot of writers I know are runners, or they are into, she's a walker. Some people are into aggressive cycling or weightlifting, something aggressive. So that has just discharged, and you really see we are just chemicals in this skin suit. So it's just a way of living. You have to be deeply committed to that, more than the product, more than what comes out. And I promise you won't have writers any life block ever again.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Things that spoil your rhythm or ruin it. And I think it's just experimental for me at my age now, right? I don't know my rhythm. So when you write something, you just get irritated by how the person thought of it. Like, how did you think of this? You try and imitate them, and it just messes you so much. And how do you find your rhythm? Like, how do you stick to one thing, and how do you know that works for you? I know time is one thing, but I'm sure there are other things that contribute.
You're writers, all of us do it. We don't intend to. And Neil Gaiman says that the best writing advice is you just write 10 million words or 1 million, whatever is the correct word he said, will be garbage. But after that, you find your voice. So you really need to get the garbage out. You just keep reading. You're not consciously emulating. You're not consciously trying to do or be Marquez or Rushdie or anything. Mumbai Mirror reviewed this book and called it similar to Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. I took it as a compliment because I love the God of Small Things. But really, it's the inner world of children growing up in a certain time in India. How different could it be? Certain parts of it that they were. So that will always be there. You are never done finding your voice. Again, I will come back to Salman Rushdie, and I'll come to George Saunders, two writers that I really like. Salman Rushdie was magical realism for a long time, then he became formulaic. Very recently, he produced some really awful books, I'm forgetting the name, The Golden House or something like that, and then Golden House. And then I think with Quixote, however you pronounce it, I think he found his voice again. These are not magical realism books. Now he's big enough to be able to make those mistakes publicly and still get paid well for it. But the point is, these things are irrelevant. You are the same with every book. It's an act of faith, and you're new. Look at Jhumpa Lahiri. I still think her first book was her best. Now she's writing in Italian, but her voice is completely different. And frankly, I think it has gotten much worse. It was a lot better. Everybody says that. But the point is, she's a new voice. I think that is very important. And you cannot produce a book every 2 years and have the same modern life and expect to produce something new. Just because the same people with the same lives in the New York circuit are publishing it, and they are the critics, and they are the publishers, and they are the writers. So I just call a lot of it regurgitation. Personally, I think Indian writing is a lot superior compared to all of that. So you have to know that first it won't be your voice. It will always be what you have consumed. And then I think what I was telling her, what I told you earlier, a way of living, your life becomes material, and a lot of writers will say this, every novel is a memoir, every memoir is a novel. There is, and Fellini said about his movies, which were so surreal, that tomorrow even if I make a movie about a fish, it will be an autobiography. And so everything becomes like that. I wanted to come to George Saunders. My favorite book of his is Lincoln in the Bardo, which won the Booker. That is magical realism, but he's a contemporary writer. 10th of December, in fact, he just came to mind because Crosswords put 10th of December and Water Phoenix as one of their recommends list just last week. So all of that is very contemporary. Now he's on the other path, and suddenly he found magical realism. That's what you want to be as a writer. You do not want to be confined. Or as an artist, Bob Dylan, just when they thought that he would never go electronic, he went electronic after having said he never will and looking down upon it. You want to be unpredictable, not for your audience, for yourself. It's about constant growth, constantly surprising yourself. It's an endless commitment. I will always say you're married to yourself, really. So, excuse me. Thank you. Will or will not copy others, just keep writing for yourself. Thank you. And just see what comes up. Never stop creating. That's it.
I think while she has a water, I'll just add to that to say that exactly what she said, that the first few years are spent consuming, but before that I've met kids who say I want to be a writer. First of all, I tell them that have a second career. Are you going to live off that career?
Yes.
Or is somebody going to support you? So if writing is going to be a career, have a first, be a doctor, engineer, architect, corporate, then be a writer. Anyway, so once you decide you want to write at your age, you're lucky that you have these thoughts now. I don't know about Rituparna. I was a doctor who ended up staying at home for my child and ended up writing. It's all accidental, really. But if you've decided to write, one thing you could do is to examine yourself to see why is it you want to write. I mean, some people, I want to write and be famous. I want to write and have my voice. So unless you find yourself first, once you find yourself first, then the rest is practice reading. As you read along, and it's just like eating, right? The more you eat, you realize what your taste is. I don't like South Indian cuisine. I prefer Punjabi. No, I like Japanese. No, I like Californian. And then you will attempt to cook Californian, and you'll do Californian with your own twist. So that's the best way I can tell you. Is that taste everything and decide what your tastes are. Once you have to also recognize your own tastes. You have to find your own style. And once you found that, you'll find your voice kicking into it, and it'll be Californian with your style. So that's the way to look. And you have a lot of years ahead of you. So make that like a practice. Like a practice run.
I think I'd like to add to that. I've been writing since I was 6 years old. I didn't know it was creative writing. At age 11, I knew I wanted to be a writer. There's a lot of Alice in Wonderland in this book. I started with writing letters to my imaginary friends at age 6. I didn't know it was creative writing, and then reading it out to them. Now I think I went to the best creative writing school in the world because I was constantly doing it, constantly reading. So it's again then, and then why are you writing shouldn't matter. Just right now, they say a lot of journaling. But of course, if you want it to be a career, it will come to you. It will haunt you until there is no other way. And yes, like she said, please support yourself. I was always writing, and then I fell into journalism. I wish people would not romanticize this idea so much, because unfortunately, fortunately, I was a full-time writer. I wish I had some advice. I wish I had someone to push me and force me to do an MBA or something. It would have been a lot more practical. You need to be self-reliant. A little bit of too much faith in the unseen can be a bit of a dangerous thing. So yeah, just write. Read what you enjoy. Just write because you love to write. There's something called the morning pages. It's a book called The Artist's Way, which is very common, and it's used in therapy also. So much PTSD that people just journal. Just keep doing that. You never know what comes out. You really don't know. I burned a whole bunch of my journals. It was very like a whole suitcase filled recently, and I thought this new novel that I'm writing is so great. And then I was like, oh no, it's not so novel. Looks like it has been marinating when I read my own journals for many years. And it's also my column for the Economic Times. A lot of it also came from there. So it's very fascinating how just that record keeping taught me about myself. So you never stop evolving, you never stop growing, you have to be committed to that. And it will never be liked by people around you. It's not as simple as writing. It becomes a way of living. You change constantly. And that's a good thing. And that's why I gave the example of George Saunders going from contemporary literary writing to magical realism, and Rushdie making the the opposite journey. Or Jhumpa Lahiri, I gave these very examples of, it's a way of living. That's something, once you have found that, you just start becoming more trusting in the work and you don't judge it. I think that's something I'm still struggling to not judge whatever came, because today it's, oh my god, all angel bells are ringing, it's so good. By afternoon I want to just throw everything. This will continue, it's very unstable. Your job is just to be disciplined and show up. That's it.
Yes, behind you, young man.
Thank you. You're gonna have to. So if I tell you that, I'll be telling you the whole book. I'm so sorry, but thank you. It is this character here. The water phoenix is something that stayed with the girl, and it's a part of the magical realism because it is not a real character, and yet there is a physical representation of an animal and why it becomes the water phoenix, why it follows her throughout the world in all strange places. There's also the water phoenix does not come out of water, so it's a myth, it's an archetype, and it's a mythology that's completely made of the child. It's not copied, like I said, from Sita, or this is a novel based on a modern Sita, none of that. So, but if I tell you any more, you really have to read it. You'll find out a little bit in chapter 1 itself.